Good morning and welcome to City Hall. We're going to get started with the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance. Our pastor was unable to make it this morning. I'm going to ask Councilman Greenwell if he'll do the double duty and do the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance. But would everyone please stand?
Our Heavenly Father, we give you thanks for the opportunity to come here this morning to conduct city business. We ask for wisdom, insight, and understanding as we address the various issues that are before us today. We pray for guidance and that your will be done. We ask these things in Christ Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Please face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, if you didn't know, it is Transit Bus Operator Appreciation Day. And no city appreciates their transit operators more than this one. So we have a group of people here that are here today to help us celebrate. Why don't you all come forward? I know Jason's here, Megan White, Kevin McCaughey, Byron Richmond, Lauren Batts. Did I leave anybody out? Okay. We have a proclamation to get started with. Then we're going to announce some of the recent significant accomplishments by our transportation department. But I'll ask the clerk to read the proclamation first.
Whereas the Embark bus operators help drive the Oklahoma City community forward. Each manages a vehicle for hours, keeping to a schedule, checking fares, giving directions, and handling stop requests. Whereas the role of Embark bus operators is integral to the transportation of residents and visitors to many neighborhoods, business districts, and entertainment and recreation destinations across Oklahoma City. Whereas the duties of an Embark bus operator are to safely maneuver an extra-large vehicle through unpredictable traffic, tough weather conditions, and very tight spaces, while exercising caution and following the laws of the road to maximize the safety of the passengers. Whereas Embark bus operators serve as upstanding examples of safety, courtesy, discipline, and effective communication as they perform their duties each and every day. Whereas on an annual basis, over 100 bus operators travel in excess of 2.7 million miles and provide more than 3 million passenger trips in the greater Oklahoma City area. Now therefore, Mick Cornett, the mayor of the city of Oklahoma City, does hereby proclaim March 18th as Transit Bus Operator Appreciation Day in Oklahoma City.
Let's show our appreciation to our transit operators. And Jason, you have some awards that you and your department has won. And I have a list of them here, but go ahead and tell everybody else.
Sure. Well, recently we were honored by our state association, and we received actually two different awards. We received the Marketing Award, and we received the System of the Year Award. And both these were presented to us by the Oklahoma Transit Association. So we're very honored to receive the awards. We think they're just a great illustration of the changes that we've made to our transit system recently have been the right changes to make. And so with the support of City Council and our COPPA Board of Trustees, we couldn't have done it without that participation. We have a lot of work to do, but we certainly feel like we're on the right track.
Probably a good opportunity to ask our citizens to increase their usage of our transportation system. If you've never ridden it, ride it. If you ride it occasionally, ride it a little more. I think you're going to find it's an enjoyable trip. You're going to be treated well. The buses are clean. The routes have been scientifically designed to try and get you to where you need to go. And I want to say that our communications is just improving so much, and I suspect that's why we received the Transit Marketing Award, because really that's about communication. And people have higher expectations of how they're going to be fitted, and with Do we have Wi-Fi on the buses? Can people tell when the bus is going to be there? Are they going to be on time? And I think just communicating with our bus riders is so important in this day and age, and it takes a little bit of the trepidation away from the person who doesn't ride very often or doesn't know if they'll feel comfortable riding a bus. So thank you all for helping to break down all those barriers. And I think the numbers speak for themselves. 3 million passenger rides every year, 100 bus drivers traversing 2.7 million miles throughout Oklahoma City. So we're out there doing a lot, and in the future hope to do a lot more. But let's just show our appreciation to our transit operators. Thank you. Pass that along. We'll pass the awards so the council can see them there. I think that'd be great. Thank you all.
Your Honor, if I may just make a couple of comments. Not only do the operators always seem very courteous to me and friendly, as well as to the other passengers, they often go beyond that and assist certain riders of the system, especially those with special needs, to be able to get on and off the bus. So they do a great job, and it always makes my day when they ask for senior verification on my fare, so thank you all.
Senior, is that what you're telling us, David?
I think they're just being kind to me.
I'm going to start riding the bus.
All right. We're on item 3 of the council agenda, and that is our opportunity to hear more from Roy Williams, the president of the Greater Oklahoma City Chamber of Commerce, who comes in periodically to give us an update. Roy, good morning.
Good morning. Mr. Mayor, members of council, Mr. City Manager, thank you again for the opportunity to share a few updates with some things that are going on. There are 5 things I wanted to mention to you briefly this morning, and if you have any questions, certainly I'd be happy to try to answer them. The first is relative to the Innovation District. The Brookings Institution and the Project for Public Spaces are continuing their work auditing our ecosystem of the Innovation District. Both of those entities were here in February providing us an interim report and some additional study activities that they actually worked on. And here's a few of the preliminary results that they announced. And I'll just remind you that the area we're talking about, generally speaking, is the area that's bounded approximately by Robinson and Lottie and 13th and 4th Street down to the railroad tracks. Some interesting statistics is that district, the Innovation District, represents 0.2% of the land in the entire city limits and 0.2% of the residents, but it has 4.7% of all the jobs in the city. The study area saw a 23% increase in employment between 2003 and 2013, that 10-year time frame, while the city as a whole saw a 12%, so almost double the rate of the city's employment growth. Within the study area, the innovation assets are concentrated really on the east side of the district, and what they refer to as the social assets and amenities are more heavily concentrated on the west side of the area. Residents who currently live in the area are predominantly minorities, and only a small percentage are foreign-born. The area represents a higher share of occupations than the city as a whole that require an associate's degree or post-secondary non-degree, which could be a very good opportunity for inclusion. And the biggest takeaway from the initial report is that we have an opportunity to really build on a culture of collaboration that we currently have to create really even denser concentration of assets and promote economic inclusion and diversity within the district itself. They also completed a workshop while they were here with the Project for Public Spaces that looked at really quick win opportunities, as they refer to it in the district. The attendance that they requested exceeded expectations, and it will give us really some next steps to look at in the very immediate future, not just for in the Innovation District, but for other districts around the city. And this summer, they're coming back, and there will be workshops on the priority issues of the district, and in the fall there will be a priority strategic planning session which will help really define the unified vision that we want to have for the Innovation District. Second thing I wanted to mention is criminal justice. We're continuing forward on this very difficult work. The Vera Institute completed their initial analysis in late December. You've probably read about it, heard about it, seen it. And it identified a number of key drivers that create the incarceration rate that we have, and also the potential for reducing the number of people that we're currently housing in the county jail. We have entered into what we refer to as Phase 2, the second phase of work with Vera, which primarily involves initially the mapping of the system as to how people get incarcerated and what the different processes are, decisions are, who makes the decisions, and all of that. There will be really extensive data analysis as well on people who are incarcerated. We're going to continue to work with Vera through the summer and into the fall, where at the fall, at the end of the contract terms, there will be an actual set of recommendations to us from Vera. And the conclusion of that will not only have priorities to reduce incarceration, but also help us really understand what kind of long-term needs do we have for our facilities, for infrastructure. So that will be the end of the study as opposed to the beginning of it. The third thing I wanted to mention is our pipeline of economic development activity. It is holding very good. It's very strong. We're working with 33 active projects right now, representing more than 6,400 potential new direct jobs. Obviously, we don't get all these projects, but that's the size of the projects we're working on. And certainly, while we see a decline in the oil and gas sector, we continue to see other companies very hungry for talent and still trying to find talent in our marketplace. To that end, we hosted our 10th annual career fair for Oklahoma college students this year, and there was strong corporate interest. We actually had 97 companies who were there exhibiting and trying to recruit students both either into internships or into full-time employment. Likewise, last week we hosted an event with Natalie Shirley, the Secretary of Education and Workforce, that targeted individuals who have recently lost their position due to layoffs, and we had 30 companies that showed up to talk to these individuals, and in fact some people were hired on the spot. And so while the news is not all that good in the oil and gas sector, there still is a whole lot of growth that we're seeing in our marketplace, predominantly in aerospace, in bioscience, in the IT segment, and in business services. So companies are hiring. Fourth thing I want to mention very briefly is our D.C. visit. We do this annually. We're taking a group to Washington, D.C. in late April. This is an annual trip that is extremely important to us to renew and to reinforce our relationship with Pentagon officials, primarily as it relates to Tinker Air Force Base and the Federal Aviation Administration. And we also meet individually with all 5 of our congressional delegation and both of our U.S. senators. So we also at that time look forward to talking about any issues that the city might have with the congressional delegation. Final thing I want to mention is our intercity visit. We took a group of about 60 business and civic leaders to Phoenix last month on our annual intercity benchmarking visit. This is, I think, our 10th or 11th. And there were a few takeaways I just want to share with you very briefly. We're going to provide you an in-depth report when we finalize it, but here's just a couple things that we noted. One was extremely strong connections with university partners. And what we saw is how that is leading to economic growth in the Phoenix metro area. We saw numerous examples of how Arizona State University, in partnership with some of the cities in the valley, were making a real impact. Cities like Tempe, downtown Phoenix, Mesa, and Scottsdale all have a significant presence of Arizona State University, and they're doing some pretty interesting initiatives in economic development. Also, we saw that their political climate around education and improving student achievement here is very similar to Phoenix, but we think they may be a little bit ahead of us because they have successfully developed both local and statewide coalitions that are really effectively advocating at the state legislature there for standards, for funding, and for student improvement. We also saw some interesting public-private partnerships and some very large employment centers that are helping to attract mixed-use development on their river. If you haven't been there, they have a body of water, much like ours. Ours is 7 miles long, theirs is 2 miles long, but they have a whole lot more activity on the riverbanks, meaning they're doing a whole lot more commercial development and office development and hotel development on their river, and not as much like we're doing in terms of activity on the water. So they have a lot less activity on the water, a lot more activity on the shoreline. So a little different approach. And then finally, and it's interesting with the timing of the awards just received by the city is about transportation planning and expansion. In Phoenix, the discussion of expanding their transit, and they have light rail, is really hand in hand with highway and road improvements. And so they take this, what is referred to as mixed modal conversation that they use, and when they go out for transit funding, they also include both road and expanded transit discussions and in their actual initiatives. So they look at sort of the whole well-rounded picture as opposed to just singly looking at one form of transit or another. So with that, I'll conclude, Mayor, and if there are any questions or comments, I'd be happy to answer.
A lot of great projects there. I think the criminal justice is one aspect that interests, us on the council so much, because we know we have a lot of work to do, and we appreciate the business community kind of taking the lead and trying to get all these governmental bodies to work together and try to get a more efficiently just criminal justice system in place that might be more cost-effective to the citizens at the end of the day. I suspect it will. Right. Any other comments or questions for Roy? Your Honor.
Roy, thanks for the report. And going back to both the Innovation District and the intercity visit, especially now with GE's Oil and Gas Research Center getting closer to coming online, perhaps we could work with OSU and OU to try to attract some engineering-type classes to be held here in the Innovation District and really build up. I mean, we've done a tremendous job with the Presbyterian Foundation and others who've been involved with developing the bio/medical research facilities over there, but extend that to beyond biomedical to engineering and other types of research. I know down at OU we've been fortunate, our firm has, in working with several of the startups, and they're in all sorts of industries, technology, communications, and to pull some of that to Oklahoma City, as well as OSU. Again, we've been fortunate to work with some of those firms, especially in the defense area, working through OSU. If we could pull some of those two groups together and merge them here in Oklahoma City to where they could have ongoing graduate studies in the engineering areas, I think it'd be tremendous and would really push that Innovation District much further than just where it might be able to go with its existing base. And the other thing on the visit to Phoenix, it was great to hear that the idea of a continuing to see an expanding city be able to work well with a strong, growing downtown area. We constantly hear that we've got to stop this sprawl from occurring in Oklahoma City. Well, Phoenix embraces it, and their growth has just exploded out there, but yet they still have a strong sense of trying to expand and develop their core part, their downtown area. And like you said, I think partnering with Arizona State University has led to that nice blend of sprawl, but yet a concentration on the downtown area. And perhaps you could invite that one speaker that was there that one morning that kind of talked about the history of Phoenix and how it has, expanded well out to a very large area, but yet they're okay with it, because we don't hear that part of the story too much here. Thank you.
Yeah, embracing sprawl is a different concept.
Any other comments or questions for Roy? Okay. Roy, thanks for coming down.
Absolutely.
Appreciate your work. We're on item 4 of the council agenda. This is the Journal of Council Proceedings. 4A is to receive the journal for March 8th And 4B is to approve the journal for March 1st. All right, any comments or questions on the journal? Well, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item 5 is request for uncontested continuances.
Mayor, just the listed item of item 11A, which will be deferred until March 29th. That has to do with aggressive panhandling.
Okay, any other requests for uncontested continuances? All right, item 6 is revocable permits. The first is an event that is intended to be held in Ward 6. It's the Eats on 8th and Harvey event that would take place on the final Friday of each month. And we have a group of people that are here representing this event. Come on forward. Good morning. And Rick? Yeah.
Good morning, Mayor. Good morning, Council.
Good morning. Rick, we'll need your name and address for the record, and feel free to introduce those that are with you.
My name is Rick Vick, organizer of Eats on 8th. To my left is Mr. Willie Graham, our operating officer. Immediately to my left, my wonderful, amazing wife, Miss Jeanette Brown Vick. And to my right is Rick Vick II, my son also. Here to answer any questions about Eats on 8th. This is the core support that supports the Eats on 8th Food Truck Festival. Each one of them helps in various different areas. And I asked them for a little support on this year if they would come, and they graciously took off their jobs to come and support the Eats on 8th Festival. We were fortunate last year that the council and the city gave us an opportunity to do Eats on 8th 2015. We were approved for August, September, and October of last year. We successfully executed August and September. We got rained out in October due to weather. Followed the city guidelines, picked up trash, made sure we had porta potties. We had special events police at all of our assignments. And now we're back this year for an opportunity to do Eats on 8th again. We have reached out to food trucks right here in the Oklahoma City area since October of last year. Some of the ones that were rained out last year, we would like to carry them over to be able to honor their vending registration fees. We had an inclement weather policy that was already in place, so those trucks are immediately carried over and honored for March. We'd just like the opportunity to continue to bring something that is positive to Oklahoma City, that'll give another layer of entertainment in the Midtown District, that will continue to be family friendly. We emphasize that on all of our markets. Eats on 8th is a place to where you can bring the family out. And one of the contributing factors to our success last year, it's a non-alcoholic food festival. And we had great results from that.
Great.
I'd be glad to answer any questions. Eats on 8th, Mr. Drew Watson, once again, with special events, has kind of pointed us in the right direction and kept us on track with our permits and our traffic plan and anything else we needed that was to be properly submitted. We just followed Drew's guidance again.
All right. Meg, any
Rick,
comments?
how many trucks do you expect for the first event, do you think?
The first one, March, the trucks are kind of waking up from the winter season.
Sure.
So right now we have about 9 scheduled for the first one in March. We anticipate that eventually, once the weather warms up, more trucks will come online and want to participate. So the first one, our deadline is actually today with the health department. We're 10 days out. So we're going to take the 9 that we currently have registered and those who choose to carry over and go with them on the first one.
Great. Well, we look forward to it. Thank you very much for stepping in. So I'd move approval of the application.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously.
Thank
Good
you,
luck,
Mayor.
Rick.
Thank you, Council.
Sticking with the Ward 6 festival theme here, Live on the Plaza is coming back. Anybody here representing the Plaza District? Come on up. Good morning, and we will need your name and address for the record.
Kayla Lewis, 1125 North McKinley, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma 73106.
All right, tell us about Live on the Plaza.
Well, Live on the Plaza is the second Friday Art Walk in the Plaza District. It's been going on for about 7 or 8 years now. and we are just continuing it. We have food trucks and artist vendors through April through October. All the businesses stay open late. We get about 1,500 people on a slow night and about 5,000 to 6,000 on a busy night. It's just a fun night in the Plaza District.
You have a couple of new businesses open. You want to share those with us?
Yeah, we from last year to this year, we had 32 businesses, and this year we have 45 businesses. So several new businesses. Well Beauty is a new one. We have a yoga studio that's opened in the past year, a natural doctor that's opened in the past year, a new jewelry store, a new creative co-op with several creative entrepreneurial women, and I'm trying to think what else. A few others. We have a wine place coming back in where Urban Wineworks is. So lots of things coming and going, or coming mostly.
Yeah, that's terrific. 13 new businesses. I'm assuming most of those are entrepreneurial.
We have some new services, which is something that we didn't really have before. We just had restaurants and retail a lot, and now we have more service into
More retail.
Yeah, so.
That's great.
Great. Move approval.
All right, we have a motion and a second. This is for Live on the Plaza, which is the second Friday of each month. Cast your votes. Passage unanimously.
Thank you.
First event will be April 8th. Good luck. All right, item 6C is a revocable right-of-way use permit from Ultramax Sports to hold the Go Girl Run, and it'll be held in Bricktown and go through wards 2, 6, and 7. Yeah, come on up. Tell us about the Go Girl Run.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Go Girl Run is a women's-only half marathon and 5K run. We had our inaugural year last year based from the Myriad Gardens. This year, we are moving over to Bricktown and Mickey Mantle Plaza. It is a women's-themed event focusing on wellness and fitness. The event encourages women to participate in an event who might not otherwise, ladies who are intimidated, maybe get into a 5K or a half marathon for the first time. It has a lot of additional perks and really heightens the experience. We're excited to be working with the Aloft Bricktown as our host hotel this year, and the Oklahoma City Dodgers and Mickey Mantle Plaza for the event. We'll be kicking off at 6:30 in the morning on Saturday the 26th, and our final runners should be back into the finish line area around 11 o'clock. Expect to be kind of packed up and ready to be done by around 1 o'clock. Really excited about the experience. Had a great year and wonderful weather last year. We're hoping for great weather again this year. The experience was such that our numbers are substantially up. We're expecting over 2,000 ladies from 7 states currently coming into Oklahoma City. We're looking forward to showing off Bricktown and the Oklahoma City area, some of our favorite districts for the event, and really looking forward to your support.
And I know the clerk would appreciate if I got your name and address.
Oh, absolutely. I'm sorry. My name is John Osland, 2300 Brookside Avenue, Edmond, Oklahoma.
2,000 runners, that's a lofty goal. We wish you luck. It starts in Ward 7. John, you want to make the motion on this? All right, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Thanks for what you're doing. All right, we'll recess the council meeting, convene as the Oklahoma City Municipal Facilities Authority. There are 4 items. All right, we have a motion and a second. Comments or questions about the MFA? All right, cast your votes. And it passes unanimously. We'll adjourn the OC MFA, convene as the Oklahoma City Public Property Authority. 3 items. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. And the PPA passes unanimously. We'll adjourn the OC PPA, convene as the Oklahoma City Environmental Assistance Trust. And there are 2 items there. All right, we have a motion and a second. Cast your votes on the EAT. It passes unanimously. We'll adjourn the OC EAT and reconvene the council meeting with the consent docket. All right, are there any individual considerations?
7F, please.
F. All right, Mark, go ahead and get started with item F.
Yeah, I'm happy to announce that item 7F is specifications to be advertised for bids on 34 locations in Ward 8 for resurfacing, repair, and sidewalk placement. It is 22.92 lane miles. It's to begin May 2016 and hopefully end by July 2017. We're spending $3,600,000 on roads in Ward 8.
Wonderful.
Mayor, Mike Mize is here this morning to talk to us a little bit about the Wellness Center RFP.
Okay.
Good morning, Mayor, council members, Manager Couch. While this presentation is being pulled up, I'll do just a little bit of background about this. I know that some of you were present when we did the RFP for the first two wellness centers, but this is for Wellness Center number 3. The RFP that we used finally for the first two wellness centers is really 95% of what's in this RFP is similar to or exactly the same as what was in the original RFP for the first two centers. There are a couple of small changes that I will talk about specifically, but that seemed to have worked very well. We, as you now know, that we have one wellness center under construction in on the northwest side of the city, and one being ready to be in construction in the southwest quadrant. One of the differences between Wellness Center number 3 RFP and the first RFP, which was effectively citywide, is that this RFP is requesting a preference for operators to be located in the northeast quadrant, specifically, as you see, bounded by the areas that are listed on the slide right now. There are a number of reasons to do that. One, as you all know, originally the MAPS process assumed that there would be 4 wellness centers that would be located throughout the city. One of the reasons to pick this area is that early on in the process, we looked at health outcomes all over the city. This is an area where we believe health outcomes can be dramatically improved by the presence of a wellness center. So that's the reason that this particular geographic location has been identified as a preference. It's not mandatory, but it is listed in the RFP as a preference. It would be on land either owned by the city or in which the city has a significant interest. We now have wellness centers in the northwest side where we have acquired land, and the one on the southwest side, the significant interest is that we have a long-term lease for that land, so that significant interest can take several different forms. The city will hire the architect and will build the facility as we have done with Wellness Centers number 1 and 2. The operator will maintain the facility, and including all the costs and expenses of operating and maintaining the facility. They will also be entitled to all the revenues from the operation of the facility. They will assist in the programming and planning of the facility. The term of the agreement will be initially 5 years with the ability to renew that for 3 additional 5-year terms. During the construction phase, and this was very successful during the design phase and during the construction phase, Wellness Center number 1, since it is currently under construction, the operator will be required to participate in construction meetings, and during that time, they will be expected to hire staff, engage consultants, subcontractors, and tenants who may be part of the facility so that they are ready to go when construction is complete. So they will be expected to use all reasonable efforts to be ready to open up once construction is complete. With respect to the qualifications, there are significant qualification requirements in the RFP. We are looking for people who have, and organizations who have, relevant experience, programs and activities that respond to the cultural and economic diversity of the area, fiscal and service capacity to operate and manage the center responsibly so that we know that fiscally we've got an operator who can continue operations for a long period of time. We hope and expect them to have demonstrated experience with health and wellness centers, and then the ability to work and cooperate with the city in order to implement a process that works well with the community. There may be some operators, and we've seen this in the past, who don't have specific wellness center experience. That's really a pretty specialized area, but we will, if they don't have specific experience, we've allowed them to alternatively express why they have similar or other relevant experience that would qualify them to operate the wellness center. There are a number of specific qualifications. The names of the organizations, there may be multiple organizations involved in the process. It does not need to be a single organization. The names of the personnel who will be directly responsible for operating and maintaining the facility, all of their background, their mission, and other relevant experience directly related to the operations. A business plan, which the folks who responded last time can tell you needs to be a very detailed and explicit business plan that shows where revenues are going to come from, how they're going to achieve those, and how those revenues are going to be spent. A fee schedule. That fee schedule, the first two wellness centers worked closely to come up with fee schedules that weren't exactly the same, but are in fact relatively similar. We would hope that this new operator will work with them as well to try to develop a fee schedule that's fair and reflective of what's happened with the other two centers. They'll need a quality assessment process, a description of their public and employee health procedures, an emergency preparedness plan as well. There is also a significant amount of standard city language involving indemnification, insurance, certificate of non-discrimination, and a notice of equal employment opportunity. That's all standard city language that's been used prior to this in the other RFPs and the other contracts for the two existing facilities. The evaluation criteria, 20% based on the qualifications and the background of the operating partner, 25% on the financial capacity and that very detailed business plan which I described before, 30% on the programs, services, and the schedule that will be used to operate the facility. We want to make sure that the programs, once again, reflect the cultural and economic diversity of the area, and that they are appropriate for that area and for seniors. 10% on the staffing and management capabilities of the organization, 5% on their ability to do public communications, marketing, and registration, 10% on quality assurance, risk management, and insurance, which for a total of 100%. And that is a fairly brief summary of the RFP as it's intended to go out right now. Are there any questions?
Yeah, Pete?
When I first heard that the location was going to be very narrow, I was disturbed by that. But after I got a chance to look at the description of where this one can be located, I think that's a good idea, because I don't want to make the same mistake that I believe we made in the location of the first facility. I want it to go someplace where it's needed, where the demographics actually match what we talked about we wanted. And I think this area is going to be able to do that, and I really think that's a good idea. The second comment I have, though, is that although we've run into a few stumbling blocks with regard to the location of the one in South Oklahoma City, the one at Capitol Hill High School, I still think it's a better location to locate where the city owns the land or the school district owns the land, because the benefit has been that long-term lease is going to build a brand new tennis court at Capitol Hill High School. which is was unexpected benefit, I think. In addition to that, at Capitol Hill, there is also a variety care health center there. That health center will move and go to another high school or junior high school someplace else in the city, because the one at Capitol Hill is going to have a back door that will actually be used as a clinic for the students, which is a very, very large high school with very high health concerns. And I think that same model is, although I would admit if we run into some bumps that I didn't anticipate with regard to the Southwest one, but I think we're going to work through those. But I think the fringe benefits for doing that are certainly worth looking at. And I'm in support of this. I mean, I had some serious reservations about locating. I knew it had to be northeast or southeast. That kind of thing had to be there. But when I heard it was going to be within a specific area, I thought, how are we ever going to get a bidder? But I think that's another question, how we get a bidder. I think it needs to go someplace where wellness is necessary, where health outcomes are poor, and I think it's worth doing it this way to locate it where it needs to be. That's my opinion. Obviously, it's not the opinion of everybody on this horseshoe, but that's my opinion.
Well, I think there still is some flexibility too, because it does say prefer. So, I mean, if it's slightly outside that area, but still will serve that area, I think it.
But I think that area mirrors the health outcomes problem better than, we hadn't been able to do that. We couldn't do it in the first one. We didn't know where we were going to get a partner. And it wasn't necessary in the second one because we took the number 2 bidder and asked them if they do one Southwest. But this one, where we're going out with a blank slate, we've got to restrict it. So I just think it's the best way to solve the problem.
Larry?
Thank you, Your Honor. I have some reservations, not objections, reservations or thoughts on the location. The second center located in Capitol Hill, I look at it as Capitol Hill, meets a very distinct need, and I think that was an excellent placement. But to call that the center that would meet the needs of, quote, Southwest Oklahoma City, unquote, I think is maybe a little bit disingenuous, because Southwest Oklahoma City goes for miles and miles all the way out and wraps around Yukon. That being said, the Department of Transportation has a very aggressive plan on the board to move traffic from out in that area into the area of I-44 and, say, Southwest 44th Street or 152 with the new Turnpike extension. There are a number of senior communities, senior adult only, that are being developed in the Southwest sector, just like there's probably up in Ward 8, that meets a different demographic need. So I think to just put blinders on and say it's going to be in the Northeast is a little bit short-sighted. It probably will be, but I think we ought to open it up for other sites. You say a site that the city already owns. There's a site right off of I-44, Woodson Park, which meets a very pronounced need of folks in that area there. So I think we ought to keep our options open as we go along. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? All right. Mike, appreciate the process. We look forward to hearing what offers we have out there from nonprofits and other health-related organizations that might be interested in being a part of this. Any other comments or questions on the consent docket? All right, we already have a motion and a second. We'll cast our votes, and it passes unanimously. On to the concurrence docket, just 3 items today. All right, any comments or questions on the concurrence docket? All right, cast your votes. It passes unanimously. Item 9 begins a series of items that require a separate vote. We'll start with an opportunity to close a utility easement in Ward 3, and it's over at Sycamore Gardens. Larry, you okay with this?
Yes, has anybody signed up?
No.
This was approved by the Planning Commission. I move for approval.
All right, cast your votes. It passes unanimously. Item 9A2 would vacate a street and alleyway easement in Ward 6 between 12th and West Park Place. Meg?
Yeah, Francis, has anybody signed up to speak on this one? This also was approved unanimously by the Planning Commission. Staff recommended approval, and the intention here is to relocate the substation that's currently at the corner of 10th and Oklahoma a little bit to the north and take it off that corner for future development opportunities. So I would move approval.
Second.
All right, we're voting on 9A2. Cast your votes. It passes unanimously. Item 9A3 would close an east-west utility easement in Ward 8 in the Esperanza, Section 2. Mark?
Thank you, Your Honor. This is an ordinance on final hearing. It's the closing of the east-west utility easement. It was recommended for approval by the Planning Commission and by staff. There are no protests that I'm aware of, so I'd move for its approval.
All right, we're voting on 9A3. Cast your votes. It passes unanimously. Item 9B is a resolution before council that deals with our continuing efforts to provide a solution for the American Indian Cultural Center.
Mayor, Craig Freeman's here this morning. We've got a little bit of a presentation, a handout, and give it a little bit of a history and what brings us to March 15th. Because March 16th is too late.
Good morning. We do have two items that are on, two agreements that are on this one item that's approved in this one resolution. And those two agreements are, one is a completion agreement, completion and sale agreement, and the other one is the management, maintenance, and operations agreement. Both of those agreements were with the state of Oklahoma through the Office of Management and Enterprise Services, the other, and also with the Native American Culture and Educational Authority. So what I'm going to do is just take us through and look a little bit at the background of the American Indian Cultural Center, talk about what led up to House Bill 2237 that made the proposal and the requirements for the city and that we're addressing here, and then our response to House Bill 2237, and then at the end we'll look at some of the provisions that are included in the two agreements that we have today. To look at some of the background that we have, look at some of the background on the American Indian Cultural Center. It was actually started in 1994 with the creation of the Native American Cultural and Educational Authority. That's a state trust where the state is a sole beneficiary of the trust. The intent of the NACEA was that it would build and then operate and maintain the American Indian Cultural Center into the future. The NACEA authorized an economic impact study, and the information we have here is some of the estimate they had on annual tax revenues that were provided for local taxes, and that would be for all local taxing jurisdictions, which would include property tax that goes to other jurisdictions, as well as sales tax that would come to the city and the portion of property tax that would come to the city, and then the state taxes. We were not involved with this study, and the point of this really isn't to hone in on those specific numbers, but just to indicate that the intent of the American Indian Cultural Center is to provide improved economic development within the city, both through the tourism that comes with the site, as well as the commercial development and the jobs and the economic activity from the commercial development around the site. And so that was the purpose and intent when it was originally conceived. The construction, so the state has issued, the state actually issued $63 million in bonds for the construction of the project. The project was suspended, the construction was suspended in 2012 when the funding was exhausted. No additional funding since that time has been provided, and so the project has been stalled. The NACEA, as well as the American Indian Cultural Center and Museum Foundation, have both been working to get the pledges in place for completion costs and trying to do what they could to move the project forward. There's been many attempts through legislation, but those have failed up to this point, and so the project has been stalled since 2012. During that time, the state has continued to provide the funding for operations of the facility, as well as the staff with the NACEA. They also have been paying on the debt service for the bonds. That led them to the point that the next solution they came to was an opportunity to try to provide some additional funding for the project through House Bill 2237, and then move the operations responsibility to the city. And so that led us to House Bill 2237. One of the important point of this is that the city was not involved at all in discussions with the state. Sure, you have a question?
Could I ask a
Sorry.
quick question before we move further?
Yes.
The state's continuing to repay the bond indebtedness.
That's correct.
And will continue to do so.
Yes.
And those dollars are out of general fund revenue for the state?
So it's appropriations to the NACEA, and then the NACEA pays that to the state for the lease of the property, and then the lease revenues are used to repay the bond. So it's an appropriation that comes through the NACEA in the form of a lease that repays the bonds. And their commitment and everything they have in 2237, as well as in the agreements that we'll look at later on, the commitment is that they will continue those appropriations to fund the bonds. So we would not take any responsibility on those outstanding bonds. So the city was not involved in discussions in the drafting of House Bill 2237, so it was provided to us. It was passed last May. Some of the provisions I'll look at here are that the state would eliminate funding for the American Indian Cultural Center operations after June 30 of 2016, so this current fiscal year. The state would provide an additional $25 million in bonds for the completion of the AICCM, and there's certain stipulations on when they would issue those bonds and how those funds would be expended. The state would transfer the responsibility to the city for operating and maintaining the AICCM once it is complete. And then the city will provide an additional $9 million for the completion of the AICCM. Additional provisions are that the state would transfer the undeveloped property surrounding the AICCM to the city. The state would transfer ownership of AICCM to the city within 5 years of the time that the bonds are paid off. And so that would be, we would take possession of the commercial property immediately upon the closing on the agreement, but then we would take possession of the American Indian Cultural Center within 5 years of the time that the bonds are paid off.
What's the reason for the 5-year delay?
And I don't think it's within that time period. I don't know why the term was set there. Within the agreements, it just says following, within the agreements that we'll have today that we're looking at, it just says following the repayment of the bonds, it would be transferred to the city. So I'm not sure what the 5 years, what the purpose of the 5 years was.
And Craig, if I could just clarify one other thing, and I think it's sort of a redundant question, but in all of our documents, it says that the state agrees to provide additional funding toward completion, but the bill specifies that it's $25 million.
Yes. So it is, and it is $25 million.
So it is $25 million.
That's correct.
Okay. Just wanted to clarify.
Yep, that's correct.
And how long will it take for those bonds that they have on there?
The bonds are in different terms that they have outstanding now, and I'm not really sure, I don't know what the term will be on the $25 million. I would assume it would be somewhere between 20 and 30 years, but I don't know the exact term on that.
Okay.
The city and the state must enter into an agreement that there are agreements that we're talking about today by January 15th. That date was later moved to March 15th, and the legislation allowed for an extension of 60 days, and we requested and received that. So that's why we come to the point that we are today. The city must use certain revenues for the American Indian Cultural Center, from the American Indian Cultural Center and the undeveloped developed property for the American Indian Cultural Center. So the intent is just that we wouldn't be taking any revenues out of that property or the operation of the facility back to the city. And then the state will create a new state trust, which will replace the Native American Cultural and Educational Authority. After receiving that proposal, basically, that came to the state, or from the state to the city, we started a process of due diligence to review the proposal, to review the legislation, and what the requirements would be. That included 3 different studies that we authorized, one on the completion cost, what the completion cost for construction and getting the museum set up to operate would be. Another one was the operations analysis, that assuming once the facility is completed, the exhibits are in place and it's operating, what the cost would be there and what the potential deficit between the revenues generated by the facility and the cost of operations would be. And then the commercial development study, which looked at the potential or the challenges to commercial development. And those results of the due diligence studies were presented to the Council's Committee on the AICCM. And in that time, as we were moving ahead with the results that we were seeing from the studies, there wasn't really a vote that was taken, but what we were seeing from that, there really was an indication that it would be a positive move for the city independently to move forward with the project. When we were preparing to go to the Council Committee, the Chickasaw Nation stepped forward with a proposal that they wanted to present to the committee, and they brought that forward on December 22nd when we had that committee meeting. And in that proposal, they offered to participate with the city and partner with the city in this process to try to help make this project come to pass. In their proposal, they said they would assist with completion costs in excess of $65 million, and we'll talk a little bit about that number here in a minute. They would develop the commercial property, own and develop the commercial property surrounding the American Indian Cultural Center. They would provide financial support for the Cultural Center operations up to $2 million per year for the first 7 years of operation. And then they would partner with the city to help us work together on a sustainable model for operations for the facility into the future. So with that, I'll come to, that brought us to this point to where since that time when House Bill 2237 was passed, we did our due diligence study, went through the process, presented to the council, the Chickasaw stepped forward. Since then, we've been working with the Chickasaw Nation and with the state of Oklahoma on trying to work towards agreements. In those agreements, there's some stipulations that are in here, but they were written in order to meet the needs of or requirements of House Bill 2237, but also to try to address some of the concerns that the council had voiced with the proposal as it was written in House Bill 2237. So the agreements are to meet those requirements, but then to try to address your concerns with the legislation.
And concerns by the Chickasaw Nation.
And concerns of the Chickasaw Nation, exactly right. So what we have written into this are some contingencies that are included. I'll talk about some of the provisions and some of the contingencies that we have written in the agreement. One contingency that is really a primary contingency is our ability to get clear title of the undeveloped property. That was the stipulation by the Chickasaw Nation that in order to develop that commercial property, they have to have clear title to be able to carry that forward as they would like to. So that's one of the contingencies. And the contingencies that we have in the agreement are contingencies that they don't automatically end the agreements, but they allow the city to terminate the agreement. So we would take action to terminate those agreements if certain contingencies are met, or would have the option to do that.
And this is a really good example of that. We're unclear that the title will be clear as we go forward, and we don't know. And the people that are going to determine that are the property title insurance companies that will make that determination at some point in the future. And so if the title is clear, then we'll be able to go forward. If the title is not clear, then two things can happen. We can either terminate the agreement and it doesn't happen, or the state can take steps to remedy the situation. It's very similar to a typical house closing contingency that someone may add. You may have a house closing that's contingent upon getting a loan. Well, if the loan doesn't happen, then the house closing doesn't take place.
One of the concerns that I have is that the reports that we did when we did the due diligence were very, very negative. I mean, we can sugarcoat it and say they were pretty negative. I mean, especially the one with regard to the commercial development was very negative. Are we confident that the funds that are going to be put in the deal by the Chickasaw Nation will make that work, number one, and number two, will not have us end up with something, if we terminate the agreements for various reasons, would not saddle us with something that doesn't work?
Well, that's one of the the benefits of this is that we have essentially sold that commercial property to the Chickasaw Nation for $14 million or $2 million a year for 7 years. And we're pledging that money back for the operations, which fills the other report concern, which was the operation shortfall that could occur over those first 7 years. And so the risk of developing that commercial property falls upon the Chickasaw Nation. And so they have an investment of $14 million. So they are motivated to make that development successful, but we are not. We're passing that risk on.
When I read the due diligence studies, it didn't sound like $14 million would be near enough to do that. And what I'm worried about, this is my concern, is that we transfer it to the Chickasaw Nation. They find out, they take another look at that due diligence study and find out it's cost twice as much as, and they decide it doesn't work. And they decide to leave the project. What's our situation then?
Well, first of all, they looked at our due diligence report, and they've done their own due diligence report, and they're a sophisticated organization. They're going in with their eyes wide open as to what the potential is. But there's risk associated with that, Councilman.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that. I mean, we can't guarantee any development is going to happen or be successful. Right. Climate's changed, and there are some obstacles down there, whether it's the floodplain, whether it's some of the utilities, whether it's some of the environmental cleanup, whether it's access. There are challenges yet to be addressed with that development.
At this point, I'm not as concerned about, because I was somebody that I have been a huge advocate for this from the very beginning. Now, I wanted it included in the last maps, if some of you remember. But I don't want to be put in a situation where several years down the road, it's there, it's not feasible, it's not running, and after there's another $50 million put into it, and somehow that reverts back to the city. That's my main concern, because I don't, the way it's been handled up to now, I don't want. I want very much to vote for this, and probably will, but I want to make sure that we're not just setting up a booby trap for ourselves down the road that just becomes a bottomless pit for funding for something that's unsuccessful just because it's gotten so convoluted.
No, I understand exactly what you're saying. So there's a couple of areas here. One is the commercial property development, the risks associated with that, which the Chickasaws are taking forward. And there's a possibility that they may not go forward with development. Not their intent. There clearly is their intent. The other issue, I think the more significant issue, has to do with the operating subsidy that would be required.
Well, the bigger piece is not whether they're successful in the commercial development. The bigger piece is what happens at the end of 7 years. Yes. If the museum itself is viable in and of itself in 7 years, it's going to be fine, whether the commercial development's fine or not.
Yes, you're correct.
But what I'm concerned about is that it won't be viable, and what we're relying on after 7 years is Oklahoma City, and that troubles me. And I'm not that risk averse normally either, but this is a situation where it is so convoluted with the state having title to part of it for 30 years. I am going to be a very reluctant yes vote, because I just don't think, no business would have done it this way. This is so far from a good business-like arranged way to do things that I'm just troubled by the fact that there could be holes in it that we're not even seeing now.
Part of the due diligence is we had a report done by a company out of Massachusetts called Consult Econ. And Consult Econ very closely looked at the operations and their range of operation deficit, knowing that almost all museums, do not run at a profit, came up with, we thought, a pretty reasonable range of what the operations deficit would be, and it was Craig, help me, 1.4 to
2.7.
2.7, with the mid-range being about $2 million. And that $2 million is where the Chickasaws came for to fill that gap over the
First 7 years.
things you can do on the operation levels to help influence that operating subsidy. But that's probably where the number is going to be. And as we go forward, hopefully we'll have other revenues and other opportunities to minimize that cost as we go forward.
And the study did indicate that it's assuming that the commercial development occurs as it's planned or in some form as it's planned, and assuming that the facility is we're able to build it out the way that it's originally planned and designed. And so there are a lot of uncertainties with this. There's no question about that. But that's what was included within that study, and that's where the Chickasaws came forward with their proposal, was based upon kind of that mid-range.
And I'm not trying to be Pollyanna-ish, Pete, about any of this, because this is really a complicated transaction, and we know that there's risk out front. But just a couple of comments I guess I would make is that, you say that no business would do it this way, and I don't disagree with you, but what we did do as a business was reach out and find a partner, or a partner reached out and found us to provide a tremendous amount of additional financial security, at least through that 7 years. So that brought me a lot more comfort than looking into an abyss. And I don't think there is a museum anywhere that makes money, but I do recall that our study with that operating deficit was before philanthropic dollars.
Yes.
And so
that gap is just looking at operations.
Right. And so, again, there isn't a museum around the country that doesn't rely on some kind of private financing. And so I think we potentially have this 7-year window to reach out to the community and develop an endowment at a level that will help support the operations going forward.
I really think that was the Chickasaws' intent, was, because they did include in their proposal that they would work with us on a viable option for sustainability going forward. And I think that's
well, and the hope is, this is a facility that will represent all 39 tribes in the state, not just one. And
right.
My hope would be that moving forward, we engage a lot of other partners.
Everything
in
that we've
building
seen, that is still the plan, and that is still the intent.
And I think it's a desire to reach out beyond the state of Oklahoma for some philanthropic partners on this. This will be viewed as a more of a national effort, and I think it can go beyond the typical philanthropic partners in Oklahoma City.
Well, at the end of the day, all museums, or most museums, operate at a deficit regardless of what their quality. I mean, that's just a given. They're going to operate at a deficit. They just don't generate the revenue that it takes to make them work. And I'm looking at the possibility that down the road that happens, and we don't, and the commercial doesn't do, because I think the commercial is a big challenge. I mean, it's a huge challenge, and I just, we've already got this O&M concern for things coming down the road that'll be online very soon. Streetcar, the stuff at the river, all that. I mean, the park, and to add another O&M that is as uncertain as this it concerns me. So,
Larry?
Jim or Craig, if you could just, what we're focusing on right now, the way I understand it, is the operations part, where the Chickasaws have committed to the first 7 years of operation. After the Indian Cultural Center is completely built, there's going to be a grand opening in effect, and that's going to start the clock. And should the revenues that come in just from the center itself, as far as the admission fees, and also I did think the lease payments for any of this other land to come in, they're included, should they not equal the operating cost of the center itself, then the Chickasaws have agreed to pay us up to $2 million each year that occurs for the first 7 years of operation.
That's correct.
That's correct.
That's correct.
Okay? And that's based on that study that you talked about, that there's a reasonable expectation that, yes, we're going to lose money on the operation, but it will be covered within the $2 million. So if we lose $1.5 million, they're going to kick in $1.5 million in year one. If we lose $5 million the first year, they're only going to kick in $2 million.
And that's, we have not worked through our agreement with the Chickasaws yet. We don't have, that'll be another agreement that has to come back to the council.
Okay, but that's the general theory?
That's the general theory that was.
Yeah, and just for clarification, we have a memorandum of understanding with the Chickasaws that the council approved in the end of January. And it kind of lays out the term. We will have to come back and have a more formal agreement with them, and that's one of the contingencies that's in it.
So from my perspective, there is a safety net for the operation cost that might cover all of the operation cost deficit the first 7 years. But after that 7 years, we are on our own. And so every dollar that's lost, should we lose it, we're going to have to figure out a way to come up with that to pay the bills.
Yes. And it could be, like Councilman Sire was talking about, through a foundation, that we have through the foundation where we have an endowment that helps to fund that into the future. There's a lot of different options to get there, but it is our responsibility. And I think in addition to what you were saying, that if in those beginning years, in those first 7 years, if that subsidy exceeds $2 million, that also will have to come from another source.
Yeah, and that's the risk that we
from us
take.
or from another source.
I'm personally comfortable. I'm comfortable with that arrangement. I just want to make sure that
Yes,
I understood it right.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, that's correct.
Any other comments or questions as Craig continues? Okay, Craig, go ahead.
All right. So another contingency we have in there is that we reach a successful agreement with the Chickasaw Nation. So again, if we aren't able to get our agreement through, if there's some issue that comes up beyond just the issue with title and that we can't come to an agreement, the city has the ability to be able to terminate the agreements. It clarifies, one of the concerns was it does clarify that the state trust does not have authority to influence operations of the facility. We have received a letter from the state back at the end of the summer, last summer, that basically said this. We now have it written into our agreement. It assigns responsibility to the city for the American Indian Cultural Center operations once it's ready to open to the public. Funds contributed by the Chickasaw Nation, and Jim talked a little bit about this, but the funds that are contributed to cover operations in those first 7 years, we're committing that those will be used only for the operation of the facility in order to satisfy some of the requirements that are in House Bill 2237. The state will transfer title, and we talked about this year, state will transfer title of the actual cultural center to the city after the bonds are retired, and it has to be within 5 years according to House Bill 2237. The completion cost in the agreement is set at $65 million. And this is important for us to talk about because the study that the NACEA has from their consultants from ADG says that it will be higher, the cost will be higher than this. The work that we did in our due diligence said that the completion cost would be higher than $65 million. We've set the completion cost in the agreement at $65 million based on the funds that we know at this point have been committed. And that is $25 million in bonds from the state, the foundation to provide an additional $31 million in private funds that they're working to raise and to get commitments on. They have the commitments, but to go back and get those secured. And then the city's commitment will be limited to $9 million. And the language is clear that our commitment on completion costs is $9 million and no more. We aren't obligated further than that. That is why we set it at $65 million. The next point of the fact that the city can, and the agreement says that the city can raise that completion cost if additional funds are available. One of the points that was in the proposals of the Chickasaw Nation is that they would help with finished costs or completion costs in excess of $65 million. They did stipulate they want to participate in the process of doing the value engineering and evaluating the plans to see where we can control costs, but that gives us that flexibility, but we couldn't write that into the agreement because we haven't finalized our agreement yet with the Chickasaw Nation. So that is why it's set at $65 million. We're aware that right now this projection for getting the project finished as it was planned and designed is in excess of that amount.
Well, there's a scenario that could be completed at $65 million. There's a desire to make it higher than that.
Right. Yes, sir.
I'm not one to take the Pollyanna, so I'm going to steal that word, but I thought that the Chickasaws had committed that should, as we go along, to build the center and to put it into operation, the meter ran over $65 million, it ran to 70 or 75 or 80 or wherever, that they were going to be good for that delta. Am I Pollyanna, or did I miss something?
That's essentially correct.
What's essentially correct? Help me out on, I hate to be parsing words,
Well,
but
yes, that is what the agreement says. I think they may be looking for some other outside sources to also help fill that gap.
that's fine, but we can go to them for that money. And what I heard you say is they want us to exercise due diligence to make sure that they value engineering it down. I have no problem with that. But should the final tab come, say 75 million, they're going to be good for $10 million from some source.
That's our understanding, yes.
Thank you.
So basically, this is just another step in the process that it helps to move this forward, move the conversation forward. Clearly, we wanted to move ahead to try to meet the agreement so that we could ensure that we do have preserve the state's commitment of $25 million in bonds. Without the Chickasaw Nation stepping up to partner with us, we would not be in a position to move forward with this project. I'm confident of that. And it just helps us now to move forward with this. There are many hurdles that we have with the contingencies that are in the agreement. There's a lot of steps to take. There are risks that are involved. But this at least just brings the conversation a step forward. We tried to satisfy, again, the requirements of House Bill 2237, the concerns of the council, and the concerns of the Chickasaw within these agreements. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right.
Mayor, just a comment, if I could. I really want to compliment your staff, Jim. This is sort of outside of the wheelhouse of what I think is in Craig's job description, and lots of others. Legal department has worked
and
around the clock,
Wyatt was here the whole
24/7.
time, and he was really on the front line of drafting this. He isn't here today, but...
And I do have to point out that OMES was very helpful on this. I know we've had some challenges with the state legislature, but OMES and President Dorflinger were very helpful.
Great. Well, I certainly derive some comfort with lots of these contingency points because it is an extremely complicated deal. It's exciting to have the Chickasaw join us as partners in this great effort, and I hope we all get to go to a ribbon cutting, but we're not finished working, that's for sure.
It is just a complicated arrangement when you take a city, a state, and a sovereign nation and think you're going to easily put together an agreement. I mean, so I think there's been cooperation at all levels. Certainly the Chickasaw, I think the state has tried to do what they could, and certainly our staff has been trying to some common good for the citizens of Oklahoma who have already invested in this opportunity. And so, we're working forward. All right, we have a motion. Is there a second? All right.
Let me ask you before we vote, is it possible to have the light turn on a paler shade of green than just this bright green?
No, sir.
Probably not.
All right. Larry?
Craig, could you explain to me on page 6 of the Exhibit E, what is going on there on the utilize the $14 million, how that works?
Page 6 of Exhibit E. I got to find it. Is that in the sale agreement?
There's two agreements.
Right. Is it in the sale agreement or in the operations?
Operation.
In the operations agreement?
What page?
Page 6.
Yeah, the big paragraph.
So the intent of this is to, again, on one of the concerns with the revenue sharing requirement, to the extent that we could provide protection for the city in that, there was a revenue sharing requirement that was included in House Bill 2237, that anything in excess of $7 million in revenues, certain revenues from the operation of the facility and the lease revenue that the city received from commercial property, that would be satisfied in here. So what we tried to do within the agreement, we couldn't get a legislative change passed, and so what we tried to do was provide an exchange where we would ensure that the $14 million, because the state doesn't believe there's a likelihood that we would reach the $7 million threshold where we would have to repay or pay the state the $25 million. And so that's an attempt with that language to try to address that. and to satisfy that requirement with the $14 million that we're confident we will be receiving, or somewhere in that neighborhood, an estimated amount of $14 million for the operations. So it's to try to satisfy that requirement for the revenue sharing.
But if we don't achieve that figure?
Well, if we don't achieve that, then, that's what the agreement with the Chickasaws will have us do. So we're taking the one agreement with the Chickasaws and taking that agreement and achieving another goal with the state.
And the language, too, that the $14 million that we're expected to receive, I think was written in there because the idea is the revenue that we receive from the Chickasaws, if it were to be less than that, what we're going to do is certify to the state in this requirement, we will certify to the state that we have provided those funds to the operation of the facility alone, and they haven't been used anywhere else.
Just a couple of points. My friend Richard always says when you have a big problem, you either lead, follow, or get out of the way. And sitting on the committee that looked at this, there have been a lot of people that got out of the way. But what I want to focus on is the leadership and echo Meg's comments. We had two groups that were great leaders in taking a look at that. And one was city staff and Mr. Couch, who spent hours and hours and hours looking at that, and that gives me great comfort. The other thing, I want to thank the great leadership of the Chickasaw Nation, who made an incredible financial commitment to this project. And I also want to thank them for their leadership on a statewide basis in keeping this moving forward with the state. I think this has been a really difficult decision for me, but in the end, I look back at what we've done at the State Fairgrounds. And I think last year we had over 2 million people that came to the State Fairgrounds, and it generated all this revenue for the city of Oklahoma City. And so I have confidence in our city staff and what they've done and the work they've done in looking at this, and so I'm going to support this.
Mark, I resent a little bit the get out of the way comment. I take what I do here pretty seriously. And if I raise a comment about something about the fiscal integrity of it, I don't expect that I need to get out of the way. I expect to be able to say what I think without being told to get out of the way, and I will continue to do that.
Councilman White, I wasn't commenting on anything you said.
Well, I mean, that's what you said. I'm just following up with what you said.
Anything that you said, sir.
Because I have, I've been very restrained today about what I think about how this project got this way. And I don't want to say anything further about it because I don't want to mess it up. But to be told to get out of the way of something where we've been bullied into this is pretty difficult for me. I've tried to be as restrained as I can about the comments I've made, and I'm going to shut up now. Before I say something, I'll be sorry.
My comments weren't intended for you, sir.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other comments or questions? Anyone in the audience hope to speak today? All right, cast your votes. It passes unanimously.
Mayor, one follow-up comment on this. We've talked about the $25 million from the state. We've talked about the $9 million that we're putting in and commitment from the Chickasaw Nation. But I think it's also very important to point out that there's $31 million of private funds that are being put in there. And without that, this project would not have gone forward. And Leon Smith is here today, who's been very integral in raising that $31 million. So it's just not the state and the Chickasaws and the city. There's a significant financial commitment by the community.
Well put. All right, we're moving on to item 9C. I understand we do need executive session on this item?
Yes, sir.
Okay, how about a motion to move 9C into executive session? Is there a second? All right, cast your votes. It passes unanimously. Item 9D, we do not need executive session, so a motion to approve the resolution would be in order. Is there a second? Is there a second? All right, cast your votes. It passes unanimously. Item 9E is claims recommended for denial. Is there anyone here hoping to speak under any item listed under 9E today? All right, how about a motion then to approve the denial? All right, cast your votes. It passes unanimously. Item 10 is claims recommended for approval. Is there anyone here hoping to speak under either of the issues on the claims for approval? All right, cast your votes. Those claims are approved. Item 11 is items from council. Item 11A has been deferred, so we'll just go around the horseshoe. James, you have anything for us today? Larry? Pete? All right. Meg?
Yes, I just want to congratulate the Colton family, Graham Colton and his mom, for an incredibly successful red tie night Saturday night. I saw you and Terry were there. It was really a big success, and I think the largest fundraiser that we have, at least in the city, supporting.
Yeah, first year they've had it where Jackie wasn't at all involved. You know, he passed away before last year's event, but this was really the first full year that they had to look going forward, and I think for Graham and Cindy to take that on it would make Jackie very proud.
Absolutely.
That his kid and his grandson are moving
I
forward.
think they really enjoyed the effort, it looked like, and it was a great evening, so congratulations.
Yeah, John? All right. Mark? All right. City manager reports.
We have nothing today, sir. Outside of claims and payroll.
Okay. We have a couple of people that have signed up for Citizens to be Heard. David and Michelle Webb. Good morning.
Hi there.
Good morning. We'll need your name and address for the record.
David and Michelle Webb. Our mailing address is P.O. Box 54738, Oklahoma City 73154. The properties that we're talking about is 6510 North Midwest Boulevard, Oklahoma City 73141, and 7717 Northeast 63rd Street, Oklahoma City 73141.
All right. Thank you.
We're here today because of David and his brother are farmers, and we own farms in that area. And we're here to request that we're able to continue to exercise our right to farm using good and beneficial farming practices, like using biosolids for fertilizer that is regulated and deemed safe and beneficial by the EPA. We, as farmers working on land that is zoned agriculture, are asked to be treated as agriculture and not as residential property, and as such not be controlled under residential ordinances. We use biosolids on our farms, and we were issued an abatement order because our neighbor had complained of the smell. The neighbor lives on agricultural land and has changed some of it to residential property to build some homes for his family. But we're asking that we can do our farming practices based on the agricultural permits that were allowed and not be confined by residential ordinances. I have information on biosolids if you're interested, but and I also have some feedback from people in the area if you're interested in hearing. I mean, it was on Channel 5 News, and then it was on their Facebook page, and so we got to see some feedback of people in the area. And we are on the outskirts of Oklahoma City, so we're really around rural residents who are used to farming practices. And based on the feedback from what they were stating is they're used to the smells and support the local farmers. And our basic concern is that when more people move out to the area, that they use residential ordinances to stop farming practices. Everything that David and his brother do to support farming is really beneficial to the land. They love agriculture. They're working very hard to preserve it. And we just want the right really to be able to farm accordingly and be excused from maybe the residential ordinances regarding smell.
This issue, city staff and also city county health department has been working for the past few weeks, and I'm a huge supporter of individuals who farm. My family has a farming operation in Oklahoma, so I fully understand. But the issue was from a health component. The city county health department did go out and pass through the area of Northeast 63rd and also Midwest City Boulevard. The smell was a concern to the city county health department. You know, I'm all for agriculture. I think everybody on this council is for agriculture, but the issue became a health issue. So that is the reason why City County Health Department did issue a citation. It was because the odor was terrible. Again, I fully support you all's operation, but anytime that you can smell something 5 miles away is a concern. And every single day for that week and a half or so, I drove that area just to see the smell, just to see were the complaints valid. And when you can smell it 5 miles away, there are some concerns there where the smell makes you want to vomit. There's some concerns there. Again, I'm not against what you all are doing, but to ask for us to exempt you all from the smell ordinance, I do have an issue because it is a health issue. And again, City County would not have given you all a citation if they did not believe it was a health issue. And so, again, I fully support you all's operation, but to ask, in my view, and I don't know what this body thinks, but that area again is in Ward 7. But again, I do have some concerns for the smell because, again, of the health issue. And again, City County would not have given a citation. It wasn't the city's arm. It wasn't our code enforcement. It was the health department who gave that citation. Again, I'm a supporter of agriculture. I'm a supporter of hardworking farmers like you all. But again, it was a health issue, the reason why a citation was given.
Is the residential in this area new?
Some of it yes, and some of it no. If you go just west of the property, their farmland off of 63rd, you have several homes that dates back almost 100 years. You go to the east. If you go to the southeast, some of those homes are new, but when you smell it from both directions, east and west, north and south, there are some concerns. And so I don't believe they should be exempt. Like I said, I fully support farmers. But if the health department says, okay, we have a problem, maybe we do have a problem.
Let them respond, John, if you...
I understand that there's a smell, but just for... And it is shocking if you've never been around it. But just some of the feedback from people who live in the area, they say, these farms have been here for years. Yes, I smell it every day when I drive by, but don't build your house on the edge if you don't want to get the smells. Cattle ranching
Can we
smells.
get a copy? Can I get a copy of that, please?
Yes, absolutely. I've lived near Jones for 15 years where this is done. Big deal. These people who live in the area are used to the smell. This is also heavily regulated by the EPA. The EPA states that they promote biosolids recycling as an environmentally safe and cost-effective solution for managing wastewater residuals. When conducted in accordance with strict state and federal regulations, the practice benefits communities and supports environmental protection efforts with an excellent source of safe organic nutrients. I know the smell is strong. I don't believe there's a health benefit or a health problem related to that. This is heavily regulated. The Veolia plant that does this works very hard at following strict guidelines, and they do work hard at reducing the odor and getting it worked into the soil as quickly as possible. And the nutrients that are given to this land are uncomparable. You can't even buy fertilizers that give the land the nutrients that this does.
Sorry, if I could speak, just, I was going to say, the reason the smell also, if you came out there today, I think you would be in agreement. I think the smell's 95% gone. The smell was there when we got the abatement notice and they had to stop work. Usually they have to be able to get it out of the truck. We have to be able to get it spread and get it worked into the soil. Once it's worked in, the soil, and then once it's worked in, the smell is gone within, I'm going to say 10 days.
Okay.
So
What are you growing?
The organic matter, sorry.
What are you growing?
Well, primarily cattle and alfalfa and wheat. And it's a fourth generation farm. It was my great grandparents' farm. Striving hard to preserve the right to farm and preserve the farm. It's very difficult. But when you look at this process, if you're putting any kind of manure on, it's going to smell until you get it worked into the soil. But we were halted by them coming out and not being able to finish.
To my understanding, you all were able to finish. That's the information that we received.
Well, by luck, but we did finish, but we stopped. They stopped for approximately 3 days.
Well, and the reason why, to my knowledge from dealing with the company, they stopped so they could put the odor stuff and do some other things so that smell wouldn't be as bad. That's to my understanding. The little pause that happened was to deal with the odor, to my understanding.
True. That's true. Now, I've been around farming my whole life. My family has put this on for over 50 to 60 years. The program is a great program, and what they do with it and how they apply it and what you have to do with the waste and being able to spread it over a large area and work it in. And then when you do the soil research and when we do the soil test and you see the organic matter, you see everything that's being replaced, organic fertilizer does smell, and I will say that. But in my opinion, wholeheartedly, this is much better than synthetic fertilizer.
Well, I'm glad you came down and engaged in the conversation. Anything else you want to say before we move on?
I'd like to just remind, it's not necessarily related, but what we are growing is wheat and alfalfa for our cow-calf operation. It's not lettuce and strawberries that we're putting on your plate. So
Well, it's organic fertilizer. It's not organic crops. So
Right.
the soil.
Okay.
And we're really just asking for permission to be able to continue
Yeah.
what we've been doing.
We're not granting anything today. We're
Right.
just here having a conversation. So
Right.
we're not engaging in any sort of vote or
Right. I guess what I would love to see if we could is because of to preserve the farm. This is a huge part of our farming operation and what it gives to us financially as far as the soil health, and I wouldn't do anything to hurt that. I would guess if we could anyway have an exemption or addendum or a special for agriculture and for to be able to keep doing this. So if when we want to do it in the future and apply manure, that we can do that and not have an abatement notice or.
Okay. Well, your request is noted. Thanks.
Okay.
Is this a case where the city county health department is enforcing one of our ordinances? Is that where the issue is? I'm kind of lost on the process here.
Sure. First of all, we've been doing land application sludge in the city of Oklahoma City for probably at least 30 years. It's been a long time. It's, as I pointed out, heavily regulated by EPA. It's actually, our program has been an EPA award-winning program over the years for that purpose. But the fact of the matter is there are odors from time to time that occur, and most of the time the odors occur when the ground's wet. It just is. When the ground's dry, it gets absorbed in, and so when you're trying to put it on in the springtime, when they want it on before the crops go in, sometimes there's a conflict between the amount of water in the soil and the optimum time to do so. And we occasionally have some complaints on it over the time, and we work through those complaints. The operator of Veolia they've got full-time people that address it, and they really do work it most of the time. We had this odor issue in the Northeast that Mr. Pettis is very aware of. There was a pretty strong event, and neighbors were upset, and complaints were made. Any ordinance that the City County Health passes, I believe, is an ordinance adopted by the city. So you're correct. They are the enforcement of that through our ordinances. So there's a couple of areas of enforcement. One would be through our ordinances through City County Health. The other is through EPA regulations who have been delegated to the state, to the Oklahoma Department of Environmental Quality. Marcia, on that. So there's a couple of enforcement actions that can take place. But this is a fairly heavily regulated process. That being said, there are still odors from time to time. It's part of the nature. However, I don't know how many centuries manure, ag enhancement of soils has been going on. It's been a long time. Now, generally, in the past, it's been animal manure, but not always over the history of time. It is an accepted process. But that being said, if we're having a strongly negative impact on some residents out there, we try to deal with those too. It's a balancing act.
Okay. Well, thanks for coming down.
Thank you.
All right. Joe Sarge Nelson.
Joe Sarge Nelson. Mr. Mayor, I Friday called the city and talked to Mr. Couch about getting an additional 1 minute time to add to this. For legal reasons on behalf of the body itself.
Yeah, well, go ahead and get started, and we'll see how it goes.
All right. Well, as you all know, I've been coming here for quite a long time, and I try to stick to the voters as much as I possibly can and to the tax people. And over the years, I've found severe changes, some good, some bad, and some outright corrupt. And there have been actions and deeds. I've witnessed a few acts of very outright bribery. And what's worse, I did report it. And those I did report it to chose not to do anything about it. And the ones that did want to, their hands were tied. But mine are not. Last week, last couple of weeks anyway, I uncovered what I do believe was a little behind-the-scenes taxpayer money grabbing, and I do intend to show this council openly and clearly that the laws, what they do say about it. Article 2, Section 8 of the city's code, and my exhibit, which you all have up there, reads and states clearly that neither the mayor nor any member of the council shall as a result in any financial interest in or reap from any benefit directly or indirectly, means through a third party or any other means, from any expenditures from this city, and it goes on. But I've always stated it clearly what the law means, but whether then or now any persons connected with this city's government cannot be involved, yet now one or more persons clearly have, was, and did violate one of the city's major laws. And there's Article 4, Section 11, exhibit of which you also have, that goes deeper in detail, states that anyone, officers, employee, elected, appointed, not or connected with or gained from or to any contract of this city, or as both laws stated, ends the same way, forfeiting their office or by being removed from the same. The documents you have up there have not legally been changed in order to do that. In other words, it means they've been changed legally. You have to draft your argument, present it before the taxpayers or the voters, and that calls for an amendment of the law to be had. And according to Article 9, Section 9 of this city's charter, of which you also have, which will also state, and you'll find the document presented does not apply or mark or heard in this very room last year when stated we change the laws every day to meet our needs. But I do believe, according to my exhibits, in the Black's Law Legal Dictionary, I believe it states clearly, to correct or rectify, amend, or order to fix a clerical error, or change or the wording specified or alter a statute or constitution and so forth, formally by adding or deleting a provision or modifying the wording. In either case, Section 9 and Article 9 still stands as printed, and the people so far have no idea what the City Hall does half the time until it's already done, and by then it's nearly too late, but not this time. A couple of weeks ago, I came here to talk about this. Today, I want to make a deal for the people, and I specify a deal for the people. I want to see the legal purchase price and the paperwork, as well as the entire bill of sale and the property stated for that hotel convention center that is marked and connected with one of the parties on this council. And as such, I want to see the land claimed and used by and through the city's economic development trusts and so forth. The deal I'm requesting is that the funds made in full from those sales be forfeited back to the city treasury or the taxpayers, and that the funds used to make the sale, so-called, only for the lands can be returned to the seller. In other words, if I buy something, I'd like to have my money back, but I'll forfeit all of the profits to it. And it goes on down there. There is a conflict of interest, and nowhere in the laws does it say anything about a third party or anybody else. It says directly or indirectly receiving monies. And in my opinion, according to certain sources I spoke to, they said if that did exist, that could cause the acts of fraud to be assumed, and will await the decision, which I'd like to hear no later than March the 22nd, unless court is preferred. The last week, but not the last, Article Section 15 is clear also for removal of misconduct. There's no excuse for a person with high caliber credentials and been with this city in one capacity or another, and with banking, and knows the restriction of all of the needs actually to execute and cut high-class caliber deals of this nature. There is no excuse for any person to say they know or did not know the rules or the laws. That just don't fly in a courtroom. But anyway, I know I'm not going to get my 3 minutes, and I'm not going to be able to finish the 4 pages, but I do have the same documents that you all have.
Okay.
And I am asking, and I was going to try to be fair play with the city council, I think y'all need to review behind closed doors, because if next Tuesday, if I don't get the answer I want, I will be in federal court.
Yeah, thank you. And we have executive session. We'll be back. We need a motion to adopt the resolution. All right. Cast your votes. It passes unanimously. All right. And that'll do it. We're adjourned. Thanks, everybody.